Hello, everybody. Today we are going to talk about questions in the passive voice. Before, we talked about present simple, past simple, future simple, modals, present perfect, and present continuous in passive forms. Now, we're going to talk about how to create questions in the passive voice. Now, questions in passive sentences are not very different from the active sentences. But how? If we keep the rule in our minds, it's easy to make passive questions. What do I mean? The rule is in active sentences and in active positive or negative sentences, not question sentences, we put the subject in the beginning, verb after that, and the object at the end. And in passive sentences, passive positive or negative sentences, what we do is that we put the object in the beginning, we put the appropriate form of be, and we put the third form of the verb, or, as we say, past participle. Now, this rule may be not very easy to keep in mind, so what we can do is to remember the steps. Step 1, we find the object of the sentence. Step 2, now it says put the object in the beginning of the sentence, but this only works for positive and negative passive sentences. But if we're talking about questions, we can't put the object in the beginning of the sentence. We put it in subject's place. So it's not the same thing in questions. And finally, we put the correct form of be and the past participle of the verb. Now, the thing is, it can be positive, negative, or question. Doesn't matter. If a sentence is passive, we have to have be and the third form of the verb, past participle. And it's done. So, let's see an active question. Why does the gardener cut the bushes? Now, does is what we call auxiliary. Auxiliary is do, does, don't, doesn't, is, isn't, are, aren't, will be, will, won't, have, haven't, has, hasn't, had, hadn't. You get the idea. So, if you're not sure if a word is auxiliary or not, you can simply try to make it negative. If you can, it means it's auxiliary. If you can't, it's not. So for example, I can make does negative. I can say doesn't. But gardener. Can I say the gardener'nt? I can't. It means it's not an auxiliary. Or you can think that the auxiliary is the word in the sentence that shows the tense of the sentence. That also works. Or, I'm not sure if it's helpful, but you can think what we call them in Turkish is yardımcı fiil. So what does the yardımcı fiil do? The yardımcı fiil yardım's the fiil. It means it shows the tense, it shows positive or negative. So, why does the gardener cut the bushes? Does is the auxiliary of the sentence. After the auxiliary, we have the subject, the gardener, and then we have the verb. In an active sentence, the verb can be in the first form. It can be in the third form if the question is present perfect or past perfect or future perfect, or it can be in the ing form. So the sentence structure, the question structure is in the beginning we have the question word, auxiliary, subject, verb, and the object. Careful, the question word is in parentheses. Why? Because not all the question sentences, not all the question structures will have a question word. Some questions are yes/no questions and some are WH questions. For example, this one is a WH question. Why? Or it could have been, does the gardener cut the bushes? Yes, she does. Or no, he doesn't. So then we wouldn't have the question word. We would simply start with does. Think about it like this. How are you? How are you? This has a question word. This sentence is not a yes/no question. It is an information question. So you can say, I'm okay, but you can't say, no, I'm not. But if I ask you, are you okay? Then, starting with auxiliary, it means it's a yes/no question. But what I will tell you is that learning this, the structure here, is not that easy. So if I were you, or when I was in your shoes, what I did was I would keep a sentence in my mind as an example. Because this is not that easy. Now, the passive voice. Why are the bushes cut? Let's remember the steps. First, we find the object, which is the bushes. Second, this time we don't put it in the beginning of the sentence, we put it in subject's place. Where's the subject? After the auxiliary. So the bushes comes right here, before the verb, after the auxiliary. But in passive sentences, we don't have auxiliaries. We only have the correct form of be. This sentence is a present simple sentence. So the present simple form of be is am is are. Because it says bushes, then it's are. Why are the bushes cut? Past participle or the third form of the verb. So what's different in passive questions is that, yes, we have the question word in the beginning if needed again, but instead of auxiliary, now we have be. Instead of subject, we have the object, and the verb has to be a past participle, always, all the time, never in a different form in a passive sentence. It can be positive, negative, or question. The passive structure, passive voice, a sentence in the passive voice has to have be and verb 3. Nothing different. So, let's see some questions. There are 5 questions here. The bold ones, the questions I mean, the questions that are in bold are in active voice. We have ABC choices. We're going to choose the passive form of the same thing, same sentence. Remember, passive and active sentences have the same meaning. The structure is different. And sometimes, of course, we are trying to say that the object is more important and etc. Or we want to be formal. Now, pause the video here. Give yourself 5 minutes because after you play the video again, I am going to show you the answers. So before we do that, it's a very good idea for you to try to find the correct option. Okay, you ready? Let's see. Why was she writing a poem? Why was a poem being written? When was the last time someone gave you a present? You see, it says choose 2 options. Why? Because give is, as we said before, is a special verb, which means it can take 2 objects, and it did in this example, you and a present. That's why in one of the correct choices, we're going to use you as the object, and in the other one, we're going to use a present as the object. When was the last time you were given a present? And when was the last time a present was given to you? We talked about this before. If the thing is the object and the person is also the object but not like in the beginning of the sentence, then we have to put to between the two objects. Where did people build Titanic? Where was Titanic built? A is not correct because this is the first form of the verb. Or we can simply understand if this is the first form or second by looking at the active question. Where did people build Titanic? Remember, in past simple questions, we use did or was, and then we use the first form. Where did you go? Not where did you went. So we can understand that this build is the first form of the verb, and this also is the first form. In which European city do people give the Nobel Peace Prize? In which European city is the Nobel Peace Prize given? Now this time we only have one correct option, even though the verb is again give. It's give, just like the second question, but this time we only have one object, the Nobel Peace Prize. We don't have another object. We don't say people, or we don't say you. And the last question, this one is a tricky one. Where did your mother give birth to you? Now this is a type of question that we don't really ask in everyday life. We simply ask, where were you born? Or when were you born? Normally, this sentence, I put this question like on purpose to show you that we already use passive, right? We say, where were you born? Were and verb 3. Born is the past participle of bear. We say bear a child. So normally this fifth question should have been, where did your mother bear you? But that would be a weird thing to ask. So we say, where were you born? Or when were you born? And when we answer, we say, I was born. I was, be, born, verb 3. And C is not correct because we put the subject in the same place, your mother. And remember, in passive sentences, the subject never stays in the same place. Moving on, there are 10 questions. Pause the video here. Give yourself 10 to 15 minutes. Turn these active sentences, active questions, into passive. Okay, ready? Let's see. When was the first Harry Potter book written? Who were you invited to a party by? Who by? If we're asking the subject, we say who by. When did the people design the symbol of the Olympic Games? When was the symbol of the Olympic Games designed? What item is stolen the most from hotels? Now, maybe your answer, the answer that you thought was correct, was what is the most stolen item from hotels? Now, that sentence is not wrong. Grammatically, it's correct, but it's not a passive sentence. It's an active sentence where stolen, the third form of the verb, is used as an adjective. Stolen item. What is the stolen item? But that sentence is an active sentence, right? It's asking for an object. But what item is stolen the most from hotels is a passive sentence. When we say, what is the most stolen item from hotels? We mean en çok çalınan eşya ne? But when we say, what item is stolen the most from hotels? Otelden en çok çalınan En çok hangi eşya çalınır? The fifth one. Who was this painting painted by? This painting means tableau, right? And painted is the verb here. So who was this painting object painted, past participle, by? Who by? Who by? Because we're asking this subject. What did Alexander Graham Bell invent? What was invented by Alexander Graham Bell? This one, normally, yes, sometimes we don't have to put by you, by me, by him, by her. But this time we have to because we're specifically asking for the object invented by Alexander Graham Bell. Seventh one. How is this word pronounced? Where are the best bananas grown? Who was penicillin discovered by? Who by? Who by? Who by? And this one is, you see, give special verb. Two objects, so we'll have two correct answers. Why were you given the raise? Or why was the raise given to you? We have some more exercises before the homework. So there were 10 sentences again, and these sentences are grammatically, in the passive voice, are correct, but the arrangement is wrong. So we need to rearrange the words in the sentences so they would make correct structured sentences. As I said before, all of the sentences are grammatically correct. They are all in the passive voice, so we don't have to add or omit anything. Everything will stay the same except for the arrangement. The ones that have the question mark at the end are obviously questions, the others are not. And a simple clue, the words that are the first, that are the beginning of the sentences, have been started with a capital letter, which means this is the first word, this is the first word, right? Pause the video here, give yourself 10 minutes, put the words in the correct places, and then we'll see the answers. You ready? Let's see. The grass was cut with the new lawn mower yesterday. Was the fire shown on the news? The photographs in the book are being shown to them by Eleanor. Who these papers should be signed by? Who by? Will a task be completed by Friday? The national anthem of Turkey is known by heart by all the Turkish people. Who is traditional dance taught by at this school? When was the last time you were asked out on a date? A letter has been delivered to Jane earlier this morning by a man in a weird hat, or by a weird man in a hat. Who were all these cakes made by? Who by? Now, moving on to the homework. We are going to make these sentences, we're going to make sentences with using passive structure and the appropriate tense. Now, if you haven't completed it, pause the video here, give yourself 15 minutes, choose the correct tense, make them passive, and reply to the person who said something like, because, right, for example, here in the first one, we are B, so we're replying to A. If you've completed, let's see. If you haven't, as I said, pause the video for 15 minutes, make the sentences passive using the words in the parentheses, and continue watching. Now, number 1. That's a beautiful picture. Yes, it was painted by my mother. 2. Have they caught the thieves yet? Yes. 2 men were arrested yesterday. Now I'm thinking maybe like the first answer can also be, it has been painted by my mother. Both answers would be correct. I just didn't add the have been part. Or it has been part, sorry. 3. Did you build the garage yourselves? No. The garage was built before we moved in, or the garage had been built before we moved in. Now here, some of you, or many of you actually, keep asking me when we're going to talk about past perfect. And this is one of the U's, right? We're going to talk about it in the following weeks, but not now. So there are 2 correct answers for the third one. The garage was built before we moved in, or the garage had been built before we moved in. 4. Why is Paul afraid of dogs? He was bitten by a dog when he was a little boy. Sarah is very ill. She was taken to the hospital last night. This room is a disgrace. It hasn't been cleaned for weeks. Did you know about your surprise party? No. It was arranged in secret, or it had been arranged in secret. Again, had been as past perfect. Again, we will talk about it later, not now. 8. Are you going to drive to work today? I can't. My car hasn't been fixed yet. And the last one. Has Tom got a job? No. He was made redundant last month. Made redundant is when you are fired from your job because the company is getting smaller, the company is shrinking. So if they have 10 workers and if somebody is made redundant, it means they don't need that person anymore. So the workers are now 9 people. That's the end. I will see you later. If you have any questions, please contact me. Bye-bye.